Hello everyone, welcome back to another one of our Marvel studies. As you can see, we've skipped ahead a little bit as far as the chronology of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the biblical analyses therein. However, instead of waiting 15 to 18 weeks to upload this study in order after Infinity War, since at the time of this recording Ant-Man and Wasp has just been released, I thought it would be good to discuss this while it's still fresh on everyone's minds. Ironically enough, today's study, though the title is for the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie, the biblical parallels that we're going to make involve neither of these characters. Our focuses today are going to be Janet Van Dyne and Ava Starr, i.e. Ghost. And we're going to compare them to you and me and to Jesus, i.e. as every biblical illustration should. I'd like to start in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15. Now, if you need clarification on any of these terms, I'll provide them as I go along, but if I assume too much, feel free to ask. There's no stupid questions. There's only sincere ones and insincere ones. I'll happily answer anything that you need to know if you ask it. That's what the comments are for. Hebrews 4 and verse 15 says, "For we do not have a high priest," i.e. the person in Israel who would perform the main sacrifice, was the illustration of Jesus in the Old Testament, who would come before God's very presence and offer a sacrifice for our sins, knowing that the penalty for sin is death. And we'll discuss that in a second, i.e. that being sin, missing God's standard, who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses. So this high priest that we have, in reference to someone, you'll catch who in a moment, sympathizes with our weaknesses, meaning not just our sinfulness, but our nature, our natural draw to be separated from God. And sympathy is different from empathy in that when you understand something, you comprehend someone's pain. That's different from someone else, who we'll mention in a moment, who physically took on their pain and knows firsthand what it's like. Catch this. We do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was tempted in all points as we are, yet without sin. So, in this high priest, we saw someone who was perfect, yet understands what it's like for us to be imperfect, to have that natural draw away from God. Yet we saw a perfect example in this high priest. Now, a lot of you are putting together the pieces in that regard, but understand that we're trying to draw some parallels here. So instead of just referencing the Old Testament like all of you know what I'm talking about, I'd like to first mention something that we all understand and know about. I'm going to ask 3 questions, draw 2 illustrations, and come to one conclusion. And hopefully in this format, we'll be able to present something clear that'll give you one more reason to enjoy this movie beyond the well-executed drama, the very fun jokes, and the well-executed action as well. I won't try and do any magic tricks, of course, but that will remain to be the point. Ant-Man and Wasp is the title, but our focuses are going to be on Janet Van Dyne and Ava Starr. Now, 3 questions about these individuals and their respective storylines in the movie. Did Janet enter the quantum realm for the same reason that Ghost gained her powers? Now, the answer to that obviously would be no. We saw at the beginning of the movie, as well as in the middle of the first, Janet went subatomic voluntarily. She entered the quantum realm in order to save lives, as opposed to Ava Van Starr, who became Ghost because of the choices of her father, the action that she chose to be with her family at the moment where they would, or whether she knew or not, would die. She made choices that were based on other people's mistakes. Janet chose to enter this realm based on her own volition, but once again, to save lives. Now, Ava, you could say arguably, she just did it to lose her life, or you can just say she just wanted to be with her daddy. Either way, one was voluntary, the other was a consequence of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The second question I'd like to ask, what did Ghost and Janet do with their powers that set them apart? Well, as far as demonstrations of Janet's powers, we only saw 2 in real life. We saw her healing her husband's mind when it was being racked by the quantum realm, and of course, we saw her healing Ghost. And interestingly enough, we see this common theme: the preservation of life, the restoring of sanity, the bringing of peace. Ghost, on the other hand, we have an assassin, we have a kidnapper, we have something that could only be compared to Baba Yaga. You get the point? So we see a certain dichotomy, between these two individuals and how they used their circumstances, if you want to put it that way, what the quantum realm gave them. And then lastly, the third question, before we start getting into the illustrations, is, did Ghost deserve to be healed by Janet when she was attempting to kill her moments before? I'll leave you to answer that question. Now we get to the illustrations. What was Ghost a good illustration of, biblically speaking? Well, in a biblical context, the best comparison we could make to Ghost is with us. Now, allow me to clarify, because I'm not saying that we as human beings in this world can walk through walls, phase through matter, or having our cells pulled apart and stitched together at the molecular level. I'm not making those assertions. However, we, like Ghost, didn't ask to be put in a state of corruption, pain, and ultimately leading to death. Everyone who is born into this world will physically die. And for most of us, it's not an easy trip on the way either. And I'm not just referring to aging. We also have the actions of other people, the fact that we are racked with diseases and other things that were originally not a part of this world, which is why we look at them and objectively say they are wrong. We have this image of something in our mind that sees what is right, and yet have never seen it once in this world in our lifetimes. Where does that come from? Christians call that the echo of Eden, the Garden of Eden, when we had a relationship with God. But when we are here today, we see this universe and see, where is this good God who put this universe in order but seems to have kind of left it to fall to pot? Well, we are what happened. God created us for the purpose of a relationship with Him. And like any relationship, you preserve yourself the right to say no. If you have no choice, it's not a relationship. It's called coercion. But when this choice was given, we chose separation from God. And He respected our choices because we actually had free will. Unfortunately, separation from God and everything under our authority meant that we would be separated from the source of peace and the source of life. Now think about this. If I'm separated from peace, what enters in its place? What is the absence of peace? Pain. What's the absence of life? Death. What was introduced when the source of peace, the source of life, the source of everything good had to separate Himself from our universe based on our choices? What we see today. A life of pain. A world of suffering. An existence that's ultimately just counting down to death or worse. Now, interestingly enough, just like Ava described the experience, we can't call this universe anything more than just pain. It hurts. But also notice that every time, for some reason, whenever we try to fix our problem on our own, we tried cleansing the genetic system, restoring that ideal, quote-unquote, gene pool, and we had the Holocaust. We got into our mind there would be a better economic system that would fix society and just restore all justice, and we have the hundreds of millions dead in the Chinese and Russian revolutions. Always tends to follow this pattern, doesn't it? War, conflict, death, destruction, pain. Perpetuating more pain. We're scared. We're trying to fix our problem. We don't have or have seen any solution save one. One that knows firsthand what death is. Knows firsthand what suffering is. Who's experienced all suffering. Who's experienced everything this world could possibly have to throw at a human being separated from God and took it on Himself. And that's where we get to our second illustration, Janet and Jesus. Janet will fulfill the role of being the Jesus illustration because Jesus, God himself, respected our choice to reject him and had no reason to involve himself in the suffering that we brought on ourselves. Now, whether it's circumstance or not, understand, we are ultimately responsible, not just because of the decisions of others, like the Star Project, but also because of our own choices. If we were to look at our lives honestly, we have to admit that suffering in this world is either our own choices or the choices of other people. And understand this. When people look at the evil in this world and say God is not good because things aren't good, you're really saying man is not good because things aren't good. The things he influences aren't good. The reason we call something not good is because we can objectively look at God and say that is not like him. But understand this as well. All of us have made decisions that caused evil, but God made a choice that would accomplish the highest possible good. Like Janet, who chose to make herself smaller, literally in this case, in order to save lives, disabling the rocket, right? Likewise, God made himself smaller by being in heaven, in glory, surrounded by the worship of angels, being the source of everything good, the source of peace itself, never even needing to know what a concept like pain, like despair, like the things that we just assume are a fact in this world. And he voluntarily, like Janet, entered into our realm, into the realm he created, and showed us what that perfect standard looked like. Because understand what sin is. It's a term that literally means to miss. It's an archery term. It means when you are aiming for the bullseye, you didn't hit it. You're a sinner. Well, missing God's perfect standard, i.e. having a relationship with him, naturally want to have some things in common with him, keeping his standards is one. When we separate ourselves from that, whether by intention or not, we're still severed from him. And for the reason that we were created for a relationship with him, we literally have one reason to exist and have violated it. But God didn't leave us in that state. God didn't leave us without the option of coming back. And when he entered this world, catch this, just like with Janet and Ava, what did Ava want to do in order to fix her own problem? Cause more pain. She wanted to kill Janet before she even had fully understood what would happen when she got here. And just in the same way, what did we as human beings all do the moment we saw perfection itself? Crucify him. Kill him in the worst way imagined by human minds. Now think about this. It was then that he, as a man, capable of experiencing pain, capable of experiencing death, because as God, the source of life, you can't physically die. You're not even physical. But God took on that human nature so that, as Hebrews 4 said, what? He could understand you. Just like what Janet said to Ghost, remember? I feel your pain. And you catch that tone. It wasn't just up here. It was in here. That she could understand exactly what Ghost was going through. But understand this as well. When that God took on our pain, took on our suffering, he did it for the restoration of our relationship with him. And it was on that note that we wonder, when did he do it? When we were starting to come around? Showed some promise as being worth saving? No, it was pretty much at the same time we saw Janet healing Ghost. It was after the final battle, when she was literally in the middle of trying to kill her, when we were at our worst, as Romans chapter 5 and verse 6 says. For when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, and perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Now think about that. We look at people like Bill, right? Not perfect, but certainly having a good moral code. I mean, whether you compare him to Morpheus or not, he wasn't going to bring an innocent little girl into this. He was going to make sure Ghost knew there was lines you did not cross. Hank Pym definitely had an attitude, but not to be misunderstood, because he's still in grieving over losing his wife. He doesn't want to take those sort of risks. He's seen what power in the hands of unworthy men have done to this world, and he wasn't going to let Yellow Jacket happen all over again, right? But think about this as well. Here's the conclusion we need to make. The restoration of our relationship is key if you're to understand what Jesus did on that cross. And when you understand as well, you have a reason to look at Ant-Man and see God's character. But what's the stereotype in our culture today? We look at God and think Hank Pym, right? He's smart. He has all the answers. He knows what to do. Just don't bother him. Don't irritate him. Very touchy, very... Is that the kind of God that we saw revealed in the person of Jesus Christ? If you want to see God's character on display, especially in regard to how invested he is in seeing you restored back to him, don't think of some hostile and bitter old man, the giant white beard apparently, right? That is just looking for a reason to cast you out of his life because he's seen this all before infinity times. Look at Bill Foster at the end of the film, who wasn't going to give up on Ava, no matter what she had done. And why? Well, look at Jesus. What was he willing to go through to see you and me restored back to him? Thank you for your time and listening to the study. If you have any sincere questions, ask them. If you'd like to encourage the ministry, do so. But most importantly, if you know someone who perhaps is familiar with this film, but not these biblical themes, who could use that common ground and common language in seeing these things illustrated firsthand, please share this with anyone you feel would be blessed by it. Thank you for your time, and remember that Jesus loves you and how he's demonstrated it in history. Not as Hank Pym demanding that you don't and also do destroy his life's work, but on the other hand, like Janet, who took our pain on himself, who has a solution to offer us if we're willing to accept it, acknowledge it, and receive him. And like Bill Paxton, I'm sorry, about Bill Paxton, may he rest in peace, Bill Foster, who wasn't willing to give up on us, no matter what we've done.